You're welcome back to the gavel. A controversial bill which seeks to ban the importation of generating sets was introduced in the Senate on Wednesday, March 11. The proposed legislation, titled Generating Set Prohibition Bill 2020, is sponsored by Senator Muhammad Bima from Niger State.
Page 1460.
A bill which will surely raise eyebrows has been introduced in the Senate. It's a legislation which seeks to ban the importation and use of generating sets in the country to curb the menace of environmental pollution. Senator Muhammad Bima from Niger State is the sponsor of the bill, and it is read for the first time during Wednesday's plenary session.
Say aye. Those against say nay. Ayes have it.
The proposed legislation states that any person who imports generating sets or knowingly sells generating sets shall be guilty of an offence and be liable on conviction to be sentenced to imprisonment for a term not less than 10 years. However, this does not apply to the importation or sale of any generating set to be used for essential services, which includes hospitals and nursing homes, airports, railway stations, elevators and research institutions, or such facilities that require 24 hours electric power supply. It further states that approval for exclusion shall be obtained from the minister in charge of power, who shall brief the Federal Executive Council quarterly on approvals granted. The bill is already eliciting discussions and strong opinions on social media hours after it is introduced on the floor of the Senate. For a country where its citizens rely on generators for electricity because of inadequate power supply, it's a bill which will be closely monitored by Nigerians. Meanwhile, a couple of constitution amendment bills are passing second reading in the Senate. They are a bill to amend the Constitution to make provision for the financial autonomy of local government councils, a bill to provide immunity for members of a legislature in respect of words spoken or written at plenary sessions or committee proceedings, as well as a bill to preclude the Federal High Court from entertaining pre-election disputes emanating from Congress, conferences, conventions or other meetings convened by political parties for the purpose of electing members of its executive committees of other governing bodies. Senate President Ahmed Lawan refers the constitution amendment bills to the Committee on Constitution Review.
And the bill is referred to the Committee on Constitution Review.
Well, thank you.
Meanwhile, the Southeast Caucus of the National Assembly is revisiting President Buhari's request for a loan of $22.7 billion. Although the Senate gave approval for the loan, these lawmakers say the Southeast was excluded from the projects which the loan is intended to facilitate.
Regrettably, last Thursday, the Senate passed the borrowing plan, which excluded the whole of Southeast. So this afternoon, we had a very good conversation with both the Senate President and also the Speaker of the House of Representatives. I'm here to report that we had a meaningful discussion. They showed not just concern, but commitment to addressing these issues.
Senator Ekwemadu disclosed that the Southeast Caucus is engaging with the leadership of the National Assembly to find a solution to the impasse.
So we are believing that the matter will either be revisited or, since it has not been passed in the House, the appropriate thing will be done and then our people's fears will be assuaged. So we'd like to thank the Senate President and the Speaker for those assurances and their commitment to national unity and unity of this country, and also for justice to all parts of Nigeria. We believe that equity should be the way for our country to make progress.
On Tuesday, March 10th, the Committee on Finance met with the Accountant General of the Federation, Mr. Ahmed Idris, to discuss the status of the country's excess crude account. Mr. Idris gave a breakdown of how monies in the excess crude account shrunk from $350 million to $71 million.
Largely, the last of the expenditure in that account, from the analysis that has been distributed, is $250 billion US, which is an investment in the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority. $250 million. Yes. So it's an investment in the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority, and it has the backing of the National Economic Council. There was also another expenditure in the account, which is for payment for the purchase of Super Tucano aircraft. It was to the tune of about $500 million US.
According to the Accountant General of the Federation, the federal government has released the sum of 493.92 billion naira, representing 6.5% of the personnel cost for January and February.
There is also payment of $4 million being professional fees, council fees. That was in 2020, which means this year. Yes. It's to a lawyer that worked on the Faris Club. Is it Faris? I mean, give me the details, please. No, it was an approval at National Economic Council, and we will bring the details. But I know I'm just reading from the statement, and the statement does not show name of beneficiary. But whatever it is, the details are there.
Let's take a look at more activities in the National Assembly during the week.
This bill.
When the bill to prohibit stigmatization of victims of insurgency was presented before the House of Representatives for second reading on March 11th, some of the lawmakers could not understand how victims of insurgency could be discriminated against.
The lack of initiatives to address stigmatization of insurgency or militancy victim is a major constraint that reflects more widely upon the impact of the insurgency on the human development in the country. Stigma, which refers to the process by which a group of individuals is labeled as socially undesirable, and these individuals are devalued due to the attributes or behaviors that are societally deemed as deeply discrediting, is a damaging social phenomenon, discriminatory, and a gross violation of the age-long fundamental rights of citizens of this country.
In the opening paragraph, he spoke about the victims. In the closing paragraph, he spoke about the insurgents. Mr. Speaker, in this last borrowing plan of the federal government, in fact, before then, in the 8th Assembly, we have passed the Northeast Development Bill Commission, which is functional today. In the borrowing plan, there is $300 million for the development and, of course, rehabilitation of the Northeast, which will include, of course, the victims. So what we see today is that he initially spoke about the victims, which we can sympathize about, but you cannot stigmatize a man who in his house is suffering from insurgency. What are you victimizing about? What you need to do is to rehabilitate him.
Mr. Speaker, he can't blow hot and cold. He is hinging his argument on the relevant sections of fundamental human rights. That's his paper. He's also saying we should protect the attackers, the insurgents, the terrorists. We should not discriminate against them. The heading is different from the body. Where are we to go, Mr. Speaker?
My point of order is...
Also, some of the lawmakers believe the bill conflicts with Section 33 to 45 of the 1999 Constitution, which addresses discrimination and fundamental human rights.
He's asking us now to do what the Constitution had provided for. Mr. Speaker, the African Charter on Human Rights and People's Rights, which we domesticated here, speaks enough on this.
If we are saying the Constitution guarantees that nobody should discriminate against anybody, and somebody is bringing a bill to re-emphasize, to re-echo that provision, what offense has he considered?
If you are an employer of labor and somebody comes to you, perhaps with no hand, because he was a victim of insurgency, and you on that basis discriminate against him and don't employ him, that is not covered under the Constitution. No. But that is not covered under the Constitution. Any other point of order?
The bill eventually passed second reading.
Those in support that will protect them, say aye. Those in support that we allow victims of discrimination to continue to be victimized, please say nay. The ayes have it.
The House also adopted a motion on the need to provide and protect the interests of blind students and special students in the higher institutions of learning. The House mandates the Committees on Basic Education and Services, Tertiary Education and Services, to liaise with the Ministry of Education towards having a forum in anticipation of a harmonized program for special students to enable them attain higher education. Now, this is where we call it a day on this week's edition of The Gavel. If you have any views on any of the issues discussed, please email us on thegavel@channelstv.com. Thank you for staying with us and see you again next week.